Hey everybody, Cinis here, and welcome back to another all-clan speedrun. This one is sub-hour, and the first thing you're probably noticing is the absence of live split in this run. That's because my main footage, which is OBS and includes the live split on the top of the screen, it was laggy to the point where it skipped frames about once every 10 seconds, and thus made it so the footage was almost unwatchable. So this is instead my backup footage using NVIDIA Shadowplay, which does not include live split. But you can time the recording for yourself, and it is going to be 59 minutes 11 seconds. The timing starts from depart on the first run and ends at the Seraph kill on the 5th run. So sub-hour hype. And since my live commentary also wasn't available, I signed myself up for about an hour of voiceover, annotating this run. So the first run of the 5 is Stygian, and it actually shouldn't be the first because it's one of the more consistent, and you should do the least consistent runs first. But the strategy for Stygian is very simple. Simply find a big old tank unit, and Frostbite Tethys, and go. That's really all there is to it. In this run, I'm going to be using a couple of Endless Titan sentries, which are great because they provide the AoE that Frostbite Tethys lacks. And they're also just strong because they have a pretty decent health bar, and these particular ones have Endless, which means I don't need to worry about them dying to high damage enemy units, of which there are a lot of, which is especially true because I'm resetting for Seraph the Temperate, who spawns in a bunch of 10x2 Shadewings. So the basic strategy is regen heavy tanks and let Frostbite Tethys do her magic. Not much else is really required. You can do it with just the units and restores, but there are certain cards that will make it very much an easier time. And Titan Sentry is one of those. It's one of the better tanks for this run because it provides AoE and provides stacking Frostbite along with Tethys. And it's especially good in the Daedalus fight, and it's especially doubly good in the Explosive Sigil fight, because anytime an enemy dies, the Titan Sentry takes 1 damage, proccing the Revenge. So that means Daedalus already has fully 20 Frostbite. Now again, my whole thing is to not care about whether the Titan Sentries die or not, because I can replay one with full health. That allows me to save investment in energy and purges, and use it elsewhere. I don't really need to care about healing my units when I can just replay them every single turn. So here's Relentless, and Daedalus is dead in 2 phases. No worries at all. Now, nothing useful comes of this, but I do have Blood for Blood, which will help me out later against big, scary frontline units, especially in waves where there are 2 of them, because Tethys can't deal with those effectively. So I purge 2 Train Stewards just because I'm not going to be using them much, and then get absolute garbage at the Unit Merchant. But that's alright. I really do have most of what I need. Endless Titan Sentries are enough on their own to take care of things. They're a little weak against bosses when they're not endless, but when they are endless, you can simply replay them, and that means the Frostbite you've built up with Frostbite Tethys on the first floor can be carried out on the 2nd and 3rd floors of Relentless Combat. Although with 2 Titan Sentries, I don't think I even need to do that very often in this particular run. Other units I would like to see would be Cold Celia, or either the Awoken or Thorned Hollows. Both of them are plenty strong. Just anything that can provide AoE or frontline removal and has a huge health bar that's a good target for regen is pretty much a go. I take Crystalline Siege just because it's probably the strongest option I have, and it's a 0 cost consume, so if it ends up going poorly, it's just gone. And I get rid of the Train Stewards, and then I'm going to remove Consume and drop the cost of Crystalline Seeds, and this is mainly for flying bosses. It works well in combination with Hoarfrost Effigy, which is an excellent card for this run. And it also is just good for a bit of splash AoE, much better than a Frozen Lance. by default. I don't need to worry about the stealth in this fight because they'll die to Frostbite. And I especially don't need to worry about it because I have Token of the Traitor, which is one of the better artifacts for this run. It saves a lot of health on the Titan sentries by killing backlines early. So I'm always happy to see that. And there are a lot of artifacts I am just really happy to see at all times. Like if I see Cuddlebeard, the run is so much better. So here's a place where I'm definitely going to have to replay the Titan sentries, and where the Endless makes such a huge difference, is because Tethys immediately gets swept down by the Sower of Sorrows. But being able to replay the Titan sentries means that I don't really need to care. Otherwise, Sower of Sorrows is a deadly boss for this run, but with enough tanking power, I can get through it like I did here. Good thing I could, otherwise the run would have just died. And this particular run is, I believe, very much ahead of pace. Again, you won't be able to see the splits just because the footage was trash, unfortunately. But it definitely did the job. I believe it's a gold split by a couple minutes. So here comes Fel. Wrath Crest is one of the easiest ones, although I tend to prefer Eternal Crest most of the time. Here, Wrath Crest is perfectly fine because my Titan sentries are endless, so the high attack units coming in don't really mean as much. If the Titan sentry dies, I can simply replay him. And now, Wrath Crest suddenly becomes a lot worse. I honestly forgot about this. Because of the Masters of Light, which will be able to sweep out my Tethys, and in most runs, there's nothing I can do to prevent that. So again, I'm going to have to lean on the Titan sentries to make things less awful. And Blood for Blood is going to be putting in a lot of work here, because much of the enemy force is going to make it through to the Pyre. There's nothing I can do about that now that Tethys is gone. And again, there's not really much I can prevent, or do to prevent Tethys from just straight up dying, which is why I'd rather see Eternal Crest. But Fel takes enough damage that I can simply replay the Titan sentries and be fine. Although unfortunately this does let a clipped Guardian through that wouldn't otherwise have done. But my Pyre will be safe for most of the rest of this run, so I don't really care. That's just annoying. And here's the savior of this particular run, Hoarfrost Effigy. And Effigy means that I can invalidate flying bosses, basically, with either 2 of them or a single one with holdover. This run essentially becomes trivial once it gets to Seraph. Just because even if you put like 10 Frostbite on Seraph, you can double that to 20, 40, 80, and by the time it's like turn 5, he'll have the cap of 999, which, because I'm doing this run on Covenant 0, is also his maximum health. So it really isn't a worry at all. And again, here's the power of Endless. These Titan sentries are absolutely taking a beating, but I can simply replay a full 35 health sentry every turn. Or at least as often as I need to. And the effigies here are also pretty nice for clearing front lines. I think I use this on the Gilded Wing, I do. And that makes it die as opposed to the Steel Wing that otherwise would have taken most of the Frostbite. And again, fresh new Titan sentry. And I should not actually have done that, I should have let it die so I could replay them both safely, which is what I was realizing and taking a pause to figure out. But as it is, it's fine. I can just replay another full health one and move right along. No need to effigy. I just play out restores in hopes of killing the Shadowwings with Token of a Traitor. Obviously that failed. Which, to be fair, it's a 1 in 27 chance. And then, in this case, Living Armor's just dead. He can't really get through the Titan sentries fast enough to deal with Tethys. I get another Crystalline Seeds, just for fun in the Seraph fight. They synergize very well with Effigy, as you're about to see. And I'm really hoping for holdover because it will make the fight even faster, but I don't get it. I instead choose to cost drop both of them. which is good enough. It means I can play them alongside most other things, and then purge it out so I'm likely to draw them anyway. That's really the best I can manage, and I end up with 3 effigies, which is more than enough to absolutely annihilate Seraph. I think it's like a 3 or 4 turn kill. Here comes Temperate, and again, I don't have to worry about the Shade Wings as much as I otherwise might, just because the endless ones choke up the damage, and Seraph's already got 48 Frostbite on turn 1. And I'm throw out Crystalline Seeds, 142, and that means he dies in 2 or 3 of the effigies. And I draw 2 of them, throw Crystalline Seeds, and then double, he's dead. That was a brutally fast Seraph fight. He didn't really stand a chance. And sometimes Temperate can be a little intense if you need to save your tank from dying, but with 3 Hoarfrost effigies, that is not one of those times. So now here comes Awoken, and Awoken is a new strat that I discovered and is just much more consistent. It was inspired in part by Chance Eluded's clan setup, which was Awoken, Hellhorned, and Umbra Remnant, as opposed to my previous Awoken, Remnant, and Hellhorned, or Umbra Hellhorned. So for this strategy, all I need is Seraph the Temperate and an Explosive Sentient, and then I just go. This is one of the most consistent strategies there is, I think. And it's so consistent because literally all it needs to work is the starting restores and then a couple of regen cards, and it can even work without the regen in some cases. So the strategy out of combat revolves mainly around purging out everything so you can play a hand of pure restores. And this is pretty fast just because it requires almost no actual decision making. It's just play all the healing and then stop. That's it, that's the combat. So I'm going to grab an Awoken unit in case there's a backline I want to use. The backline unit is more or less optional, but it is important to have some way of dealing with front lines or backlines that Rejuvenate can't kill. So I look for an Animus of Will, and my obvious choice would be to get Large Stone on it, so that it deals 18 by 3 by base. And that's enough to mop up early game, even without Sentient, really. So I set that up, and then I just spam Rejuvenate, torch out the Penitents so that I don't have to deal with the Blights. And then I'm just stacking up a regen so I can kill the boss, which I do, no problem. And that's what pretty much an average fight in this run looks like, honestly. You just choose from a plethora of different backline units, like Horned Warrior, Demon Fiend, all completely usable. So are Animus of Speed, Animus of Will, you've got loads of options. So I get the Large Stone I was seeking, and then I'm considering between Battlestone and Fury Stone. I opt for Fury Stone. I would not do this again. I think Battlestone or just holding the slot was the right choice. I take a Stygian Guard and end up with Ice and Pyre, which does come in handy once in a while in this run, but overall I don't think I would take it again. I think I'd rather have the Restores. I just took it as a way of ensuring I clear things like Gilded Wings or flying bosses that go to the 3rd floor. So now, Animus of Will comes in with like a 32 by 3 attack power, but this drops all the way back down to 18 by 3 come Relentless, which is really when you want it, because regen in this run is fairly limited for the opening portions of the game if you don't get like a Wildwood Sap early. Which in this case I don't, and I'm not actually sure I get one at all. Although, nah, I think I do. Never mind. But here's Relentless, and Daedalus dies in a single phase, which is exceedingly fast, and I have a Wildwood Tome now, which I can use to apply quick and make things even faster on turns where I would otherwise immediately kill everything. Because it just skips the enemy's combat animations, which is really nice. So again, purging is by far the top priority in this run. I want to get out superfluous units and torches as much as I can. Permafrost and Ice and Pyre because I'm only going to need it every so often, and I want it out of my draw cycle when I don't. Pretty simple stuff there. And off to fight 4. And fights 4 and 5 are probably the easiest portion of this run, because it's right after a huge step up in power for Sentient, in that she now deals, I think, 30 damage to targets rather than 60, and I also get an extra point of energy, which lets me play more restores, if I had enough restores to play in every hand, of course. And that's the main limiting factor for this run, especially in Rings 4 and 5, is whether I can restore fast enough to get enough regen to kill the boss. That's not an issue here because I have a pretty good backliner. I could take Edge Prior, but I just chose not to, and took Invigorating Solution instead to help with the draw. And again, regardless of upgrades, I am just going for the Purge. Having a hand of 5 restores is kind of the keystone of this run. And so I'm going to take the time to do a quick Merchant Purge before moving on. The more restores you play, the more you clear front lines, which is just the faster and the safer the run is. This is a particularly obnoxious fight because the clipped Guardian at the end of this wave right here is really, really scary. He has 13 damage, but thankfully because of the Animus of Will, he is dead. And I actually don't think I've had to use Pyre Wall's armor much, if at all, this run, because it has gone so well. I've gotten more or less everything I wanted. Now here I'm not actually able to kill Harpy because its attack is so strong until I rejuvenate, and then we're fine. If this were Spike Sentient, obviously it would have been trivial, but here Harpy is able to get all the way to my Animus before it dies. But that's fine, because now I have Spreading Spores, and Spreading Spores are an excellent tool for this run. Not only do they carry spikes, which are helpful to clear out unnecessary rejuvenate procs on low health targets, they also have a bunch of regen, which makes Relentless more trivial, and the spikes help with that as well, especially against flying bosses with multi-strike, like, you know, Fel and Seraph. So I'm very happy to see that, and I'm even more happy to see Holdover along with a cost reduction so that it's playable alongside all the restores in my hand. And Spreading Spore's main downfall as a card in this run is simply that I can't play Spreading Spores as a direct rejuvenate proc. It only adds regen without immediately healing the Sentient. So that will cause frontline killing woes once in a while. But I do have Ice and Pyre to cover that, and the more Spreading Spores there are, the closer to Relentless you're getting, which is when you want more regen as opposed to more direct rejuvenate procs. So it has its own natural transition from direct healing to Spreading Spores that works remarkably well, as you can see here. So that's Fel taken care of, no problem. And I do take a last stand in order to double the rage, hopefully at the start of the fight, on my Animus of Will from 7 to 14, which is a pretty big step up in power, and will help me destroy things like Gilded Wings. And despite the fact that I'd probably rather take magic upgrades, I'm going to take that Unstable Vortex every time. And I also have Pyrostone Casing, so I can take the Strength Stone here, which puts my Animus of Will even higher in terms of attack. That was a lucky artifact grab, although it's not a particularly impactful one because I now have Rejuvenate deal 60 damage to an enemy unit, which is strong enough with the correct hand to clear most things, all the way up to dealing 100 damage to the Gilded Wing on turn 1. And then he gets quick, so now enemy combat animations don't have to play. Although, that's not true for these guys because they're annoying and have extinguish animations. Still, I'm able to clear them out. And the spikes make life quite a bit easier, just because backlines like the Light Wings and the Wilt Wings just die straight up. I don't have to worry about them at all. And then Living Armor is pretty much trivial, especially when I have a damage scaler as big as the Animus of Will. He just can't build up enough attack to overcome the regen in time, and just dies. Nephil would have also been fine. Again, single hit bosses are much easier compared to a full spiked Bramble Lash run. I hold over the 0 cost restore just as like an energy pump to reduce the average cost of my hand. And then I drop the cost of Last Stand so everything else is playable. Should not have checked this version. Obviously I couldn't afford anything. But normally I place Live Split over my coin and artifact area on the top of my screen. Those of you who watched my last run will see the setup. But since it's not recorded, it is still there. But it's not in this backup footage. I can't see the coins even though this recording will show them. I should definitely figure out a better spot to put Live Split for the next run I do of this, so that I can see my money, because it leads me into trouble not being able to see it sometimes. But still, it's fine. In this particular run, at least it's fine. And Seraph's not going anywhere. He is definitely going to die at Relentless. I've already built up enough regen to ensure that's the case. And in fact, he's able to take a decent amount of direct damage from the Rejuvenate procs. So now I'm pivoting towards Spreading Spores, not that I really have much of a choice. And here's Relentless, and Seraph dies easily. I do play the Spreading Spores because they do make things a good deal faster. They're worth 6 damage per phase, and the time to play them is relatively slow. So that's Awoken taken care of, and I'm already making great time, under 22 minutes, whereas my previous run finished Awoken at 28, and that's mostly due to the change in strategy. This particular one is most importantly less RNG heavy on the resets, so you can just do the run. There's a 2 in 9 chance that any given Bramble Lash, or sorry, 4 in 9 chance that any given Bramble Lash will work. And it's already hard enough to reset for a single uncommon card. So the reset time is just too much, especially when under half of runs will actually work. And the Melting Remnant run is an RNG run like that. You need to see Burnout Flicker, and then you need to see a Seraph other than Chaste. Or sorry, other than Diligent. Chaste is fine. And in fact, I'm going for Chaste here. Chaste is the one you can't do for the Void Binding run, which is at the very end of this run. So I should definitely be doing Melting Remnant first, because it is the most reset heavy of any of these runs. But it doesn't really matter as long as you can get Remnant consistently, which I think I have been able to do pretty well. So in this run, I have Flicker's Liquor as a starting artifact, which is nice because it, in certain situations, will let me play out cards I wouldn't otherwise be able to because of Ember Drain, which this run relies heavily on. The nice thing about this particular clan combo is it synergizes with Ember Drain excellently. So I can take Purifying Cleanse, Perils of Production here, and then a Wick Lash can be reduced to 0 cost. I can also take Void Binding and even Furnace Tap. And all of those cards can in some way be played with Ember Drain. So here I'm going to take a holdover Perils of Production that will allow me to play cards such as Blights regardless of my Ember Drain count. I think that's what I meant to say. I'm doing this in one take. It's an hour long. So just play out the Train Stewards, and then my primary order of business is just find a way to offensively scale high enough to kill Gilded Wings. They're the hardest part of this run, not Relentless, especially not when you've got a big ol' flicker that you can reform, which I can because of Sacred Wicks. Also, I would like to shout out myself for using a Burnout Enhanced Morsel to kill Collector there. Just a little humble brag, I thought that play was cool. And I'm taking more Purifying Cleanses, more Perils of Production, and I'm just going to run a full Ember Drain kit, because I started with 2, I think it's Immortal Trade, yeah, the Lifesteal card. And I end up with another holdover, which I put on Wick Lash to make sure my burnout's not too bad. And then I'm just going to purge Train Stewards, which I shouldn't actually do. I should purge Shade Splitters because they're much slower and less useful. And then purge a card, gain a card. I do get rid of a Shade Splitter here. And I take a Remnant card, which is Formless Child. This isn't actually that helpful. It's one of the worst rares. And I probably actually should have chosen Umbra for this, because I would want Furnace Tap or Forever Consumed or Umbra Stone. Those would all be preferable. But Formless Child comes in handy once in a while, just because it's a way of pseudo-reforming Flicker that I wouldn't otherwise have, and it can be placed in the back line to ensure it will take him as opposed to anything else. However, this didn't really come to pass in this particular run, because Formless Child incentivizes you to keep no units other than Flicker in your deck, but that was not what I wanted to do because I have Flicker's Liquor, and having free dregs is preferable. Just because they can play for free things like Blights and Scourges that I could not otherwise play. So I kind of have those conflicting incentives there, and I choose to mostly keep units while I purge out Train Stewards, and now I have Bounty Stalker. And Bounty Stalker is a great way to kill Gilded Wings just because it can scale so well. So my wish list is now to get things like Multi-Strike or the Burnout Endless combination on it. And I believe I actually get some very mediocre upgrades on it. I don't think I was very happy about this in the moment. But I realize I have only 100 gold and don't have enough Dala to actually be able to get Multi-Strike on it. So I check to make sure there's nothing I would miss, which there isn't, and then move on with my life. It would have been great to get Multi-Strike there, and it was kind of a mistake that I even re-rolled at all. But it's okay, this run is still a victory, although it's a closer one than it should have been. So now I take the Spell Shield Trial in order to get enough money to get the upgrades I want / need. And then I am actually going to have a pretty hard time compared to a normal Remnant run with actually replaying Bounty Stalker after he dies the first time, just because I have only Sacred Wicks for my Reform card at the moment. So playing too many units will lead to Bounty Stalker not getting reformed, but that's not the case here. I choose to keep him around for a little longer because I do only have 2 Sacred Wicks. I could have and probably should have at some point removed Consume from them, but I just didn't. And this is by far the slowest of the 5 runs because of mistakes like that. But it's still in decent shape for now. Bounty Stalker got 2 Extinguishes, so it's up to 30 base, and I got another Sacred Wicks to make sure I can replay the Bounty Stalker when I need it. And so at this point, this run becomes a little bit like brain heavy, and I have to slow down and take my time making decisions, which is obviously not ideal for a speedrun. And I just skipped this straight up. I was looking for, I don't know what I was looking for, maybe Consume removal, but double stacking and applying more burnout when I already have more than enough just isn't worth the money. Especially not when I have important unit upgrades I want to get. But I don't think I yet am going to slow down here, other than I am facing, once again, the Sycophants of Seraph and that very, very scary Clip Guardian in the back, who will eventually get all the way up to 13 attack, and I don't have a way to deal with him. So I just don't. And I let him take his toll on my Pyre, which makes the next fight absolutely brutal. Just because I have to take so much time and make so many tough decisions. And he's going to take my Pyre all the way down to 19 health, and I have to check if I die, which I don't, thankfully. But it is very close. And this Bounty Stalker play is nice just because I can then make sure the frontliner dies and doesn't get an attack boost from Sycophants that might otherwise have killed me. As it was, we've got Sower of Sorrows taken down easily, and now I have Reason removal, which I can put Holdover on, and thus clear Ember Drain every turn. So then, I'm also dealing with Fell coming up, and I get Blazing Bolts as extra insurance against frontline, and now I have a large stone multi-strike Bounty Stalker, which already has 65/2 attack. That's a pretty good setup. Not my favorite, but good enough that I'm happy with it. And I can, in this way, use him as a, not really a chump blocker, but as a softener for enemies before they get to flicker. Can't really be a chump blocker with 45 health and 65/2 attack. But if that were a thing, this Bounty Stalker would probably be it. So he's got pretty good attack that will help me get through some of the bigger units in this particular fight. And then here's where I start figuring out whether I want to enhance Bounty Stalker or Flicker. Because Bounty Stalker can be given Burnout. And in some cases should. This isn't one of them. But once he's reformed, he's going to have some amount of Burnout whether I like it or not. And thus playing Burnout extenders like Wicklash isn't a bad idea, and I'm going to start doing that here, so I can also play out Purifying Cleanse. And again, I get very close to an untimely demise. In fact, I believe I have to reset this fight. Which is something you can do in all clans. In other runs, single clan runs, resetting adds a minute to the in-game timer. And that makes everything essentially impossible if you ever reset a run. But it's more of like a 10-15 second process here, because Fell doesn't quite die, although I believe it's close. The top line Relentless unit is going to, or non-Relentless unit is going to make it to the pyre. Oh, never mind, this isn't the fight I reset. Something is, and it probably is fight 7. There is definitely a fight in this run I reset. And that loses me probably a minute. But this run is already slow, and all the other runs have been so fast that I don't really care. So here's Holdover on Reason Removal, along with reducing it to 0 cost, so it's always playable. And now I have Blazing Bolts as a secondary way of clearing giant enemies. And on Blazing Bolts goes 20 magic power, so eventually it will be a 50 power 4 times hit, I think. That will do pretty well for itself, cleaning up backlines. But again, I do have to have the energy to play it, which relies on Reason Removal clearing my Ember Drain, and more importantly, it relies on Reason Removal being played last. And I believe I screw that up a couple times, and play Reason Removal first, which means Ember Drain stays on the Flicker or wherever else I'm playing it. And that's bad, because then I can't play Blazing Bolts reliably or anything else I might want to play. But I've got enough damage to kill the Gilded Wings until suddenly I don't, and here's a place where I screw up the Perils play. So I get the first upgrade on Blazing Bolts, it now hits twice. And again, I'm using Bounty Stalker as like a pure chump blocker here. Now again, I screw up the Reason Removal order. Not great on my end, I will say that much, but it's something I can fix for next time, and I do believe there will have to be a next time, because I'm not able to pull back a Bounty Stalker. Oh no, there he is. I could have sworn I reset at least once. And this might be why right here. Because now I have to stack up Burnout on everything. And Nephil takes barely any damage. And I have to crank that up with Immortal Trade before just realizing, who cares. I obviously should have Wicklashed the Bounty Stalker, but I didn't do that. No, I think I am still able to live here. Maybe it's Seraph that I reset. And I believe he gets just enough damage placed on him that I can just barely survive with Blazing Bolts on the next turn. And that wipes Nephil clean off the map, and then we're finally good to go. Again, takes way longer than I would have liked, just because my pyre health's been a bit low, and my bounty stalker hasn't died enough to the point where it's got good scaling. So I kind of have to slow down and figure out what's going on, which in a speedrun is not good. Making decisions is slow. The ideal speedrun is Sketch's Shadow Siege, which requires not a single brain cell. So I'm just purging out dregs to make sure I draw things like blazing bolts when I need them. And then the Seraph fight begins. I do think this is the one that takes a couple tries, because I distinctly remember having to reset at least once. So Bounty Stalker, Rector Flicker, floor 1. And I think I do something ridiculously stupid. And it will probably be plainly obvious what it is. And it's probably going to be a bad reason removal. Nope, this one is not a bad reason removal. But I wasted my Formless Child, for starters, and I've got too much Ember Drain. So I have to be very careful with my Blazing Bolts plays. Bounty Stalker's dead. I only have Sacred Wicks left to remove it. Things are going poorly. And there's nothing I can do here to save poor Bounty Stalker, although I'll bring him back, of course, with Reform. But again, that Sacred Wicks play was unwise. And I've got Ember Drain even after Reason removal, courtesy of the Pyre Wings. And you can see we've kind of reached critical Gilded Wing mass. There are too many of them, I can't really kill them with just Flicker, and I'm going to have to wait a turn to get my Bounty Stalker back. And that's not happening. Because then the Gilded Wings are up, and barring some excellent Blazing Bolts luck, I don't believe I can take care of it. That Gilded Wing's fine, but I can't kill the second set unless I redraw Blazing Bolts, which I'm unlikely to do because I have too many holdovers. And I probably could have saved it right here had I not played most of my holdover cards, but even then, would still have been pretty unlikely to draw. So no Blazing Bolts means I just died of that. I should have reset right here because it was plainly obvious. But I wait until, like, the last moment, right as my Pyre dies. It's like, oh god, better reset. And don't restart the run, just go back to main menu and restart the fight. So this time I'm going to set up on floor 2 and things will go a lot cleaner. Flicker goes floor 2, Bounty Stalker goes floor 2. And now I'm going to start buffing up the Bounty Stalker instead of Flicker. At least as much as I can. And just leave him as the frontliner. His attack at this point is outscaling Flicker pretty substantially. I do need to still make sure Flicker lives, just because Burnout is the thing. But I do my best to put the more beneficial Burnout cards onto Bounty Stalker as opposed to Flicker. Here I can clear the Light Wings with a nicely timed Blazing Bolts, which is really handy. And again, Purifying Cleanse goes mostly onto Flicker as opposed to onto Bounty Stalker, but Wicklash and Immortal Trade are my combo of choice on the Bounty Stalker. Here I believe he just dies and there's nothing I can do about it. No, 2 Purifying Cleanses do the job. I'm misremembering this pretty substantially. But Bounty Stalker's alive, the Lightnings get through, but we're not at critical Gilded Wing mass. A good Blazing Bolts can wipe the floor, and I can also do this to ensure the death of the Light Wings. Again, this is much too slow from an ideal perspective. I would really like to make decisions a bit quicker, but this fight is complicated enough that I just have to take the time. There's no way around it. And I make the wrong decisions plenty of those times. For example, I should have enhanced Flicker with 5 attack a bit earlier, so he could have killed the Gilded Wing rather than leaving it on 5 health. That's worth 8 Pyre health and an animation. Not great. Not terrible, mind you, but not great. And then same thing here. Bounty Stalker gets all the love, Flicker just gets a couple of Purifying Cleanses. And then I'm not worried about Relentless. Actually, maybe I am worried about Relentless. I don't remember my thought process at the moment. But with 4 stacks of lifesteal and a fair bit, yeah, he's not taking much damage, if at any damage. So I have to fix that somehow. And the way to fix that was to reform a unit and chump block with it, I believe. Because the reason why this was so bad was Bounty Stalker died turn 1 and couldn't make use of the lifesteal. But now that he can, Seraph dies easily. And Flicker's able to clean up. And that's the Melting Remnant run. So then it's on to the 2 more consistent reset runs, which are the Hellhorn Stygian Standard Inferno run, and then the Umbra Void Bindings, now using Melting Remnant instead of Hellhorn. Melting Remnant helps relatively little, but Hellhorn is better for Awoken, and Melting Remnant does have the reason removal and what have you. So that's well worth it. It's a good clan switch. So here's Hellhorn and Stygian. I really need to get my menuing between runs a bit smoother. I have not yet practiced that. And now it's just reset for an Inferno, and hope that the first one you get works. Definitely RNG heavy, and something I would probably put towards the front in my future All Clans runs. Just because it is one of the more RNG heavy speed runs. Thankfully, all the RNG is early with the holdover, resets, and spell weakness. So you can kind of tell if you're going to get a good one. This is a very reset heavy run, but it's worth it based on speed. The average Inferno run is very fast. And I can't take that Inferno because Seraph the Diligent absolutely ruins this run. It just can't be done. Chaste is fine, Temperate is fine, but no Diligent. I don't have to worry about champion upgrades, though, and in fact this is the only run in which I don't. So it's not a huge worry in terms of RNG. At 2/3 any given Inferno start will work. Or at least is playable. You still need to get holdover and spell weakness. But here's an Inferno. And here's a Vapor Funnel, which is a fairly strong starting artifact. So I'm happy to take this run. Don't need a unit draft, though. They all will just die to the Inferno. I get Inferno turn 2, which allows me to kill a Collector I might not otherwise have. That's pretty lucky. And my secondary spell is Helical Chrysalis, which is a great one. It allows me to kill bosses I wouldn't otherwise be able to, at least when the draws aren't that awful. Because, boy, it was that bad. Here's Energy Siphon, which is great to see. It's both the primary spell weakness card and means I'm unlikely to have to reset this run even if I don't get holdover on the Inferno. Skip the Hellhorn banner just because it's not worth it. And then immediately see holdover, which is good because I can't... no, yes, I can, never mind. But I also am able to get a Purge instead of having to re-roll, which means I'm going to draw Energy Siphon more commonly in the coming fights, and that's pretty handy in itself. I take Mark of Invasion because I have Vapor Funnel, and the downside is completely mitigated as a result. The clergyman just died of the pyre before even getting to attack. So it's just like a 10-second time loss for the extra money, which could potentially be made up by allowing me to get double stack on something. And I just take that bet. So for the Inferno strat, as I'm sure you all know, having watched this channel before, but if you don't, you need 2 Infernos with holdover, sometimes 1 if you get a holdover double stack Energy Siphon fast enough. But in general, 2. And then you just win. So I end up with double stack, which I'm very happy to see. I can't get holdover, so if I see a dupe, I'm going to choose to use it on Inferno. Heaven's Aid is useless, but there are events that are pretty great there, like the Urchin Spines event that gives you a Stygian consumable card, or the quintuple dupe. Those are well worth the time investment of taking the concealed caverns, in my opinion. Just because they make the run so much less likely to die as well. Because you still totally can screw this up by misplaying, but more spell weakness gives a higher margin for error. For this run, I get a pretty decent draw, nothing special in either direction, really. And Daedalus is reasonably fast. Take the energy so I can play 2 Infernos. You kind of have to choose which strategy you're going for right after Daedalus, because 4 energy is necessary to play 2 Infernos. So I choose to dupe the Inferno, and then move along. Again, no champion upgrades because you don't use him. He just chills in your deck, or you play him out just to get rid of him. I choose not to do that, but I know some speedrunners like Never Nathaniel do. It seems completely reasonable. Or maybe it's Chance who does that. Anyway, someone does it in the community. I'm just not one of them. And here's Thoughtbinder. I'm hoping for Energy Siphon, but I don't believe I see it until it's too late. That's fine. It's like a 2-second time loss, and it's just the luck of the draw. I'm looking for Urchin Spines, but I don't see it here. It doesn't really matter. As long as I can get holdover on the Energy Siphon, I'm good to go. And so here's my opportunity to look for that. After purging out 2 Frozen Lances, in case I don't get holdover, the thinner deck size is important. Double stack I already have, holdover is what I need. And then I choose to Merchant Purge the last Frozen Lance, and a Train Steward in order to just make the draws of Inferno and Energy Siphon at the start more reliable. That's all pretty standard stuff, and really so is the rest of this run. It is probably a representative sample of what most Inferno runs look like, honestly. Here I'm using what are known as Respite Strats in order to set up my cards in the right order that I can just play them all during holdover, and then hold them over through the brief Respite wave, so I can't kill the first wave every time, because then I won't have anything to use the Energy Siphon on during a brief Respite. So those are called Respite Strats, and I use them whenever I have a holdover Energy Siphon. You'll see them again in Ring 7, I believe. I could use riskier, faster strats if this weren't all clans, which are just fast strats. You kill the first wing with 2 Infernos every time. This is a great opening draw, by the way. If you draw something like 300 damage in your opening draw with only 600 in the deck, that's really good. And it leads to a 3-turn fell kill, which is ridiculously fast. And now because I don't have Urchin Spines, which would be the only reason I take 5 energy, I choose instead to take draw, just to, again, more consistency. And consistency is king in all clans. Not dying 40-ish minutes into the run is a big deal. Not to the point where I'm going to Merchant Purge there, though, because I can only get 2. This is, again, textbook Respite Strats. Although I think I actually misplay here. No, I don't. This turn, I think I might misplay. Yes. So now I have to miss this Inferno on the second floor in order to make sure the setup is correct, and now my holdovers are out of order, so I can't use the keys. Like a 3-second loss, there are much more deadly misplays I could have made. But we're good to go. This is a 600 damage deck once everything is held over, and that can easily wipe out Nephilim. No worries there. And then I'm going to take a final dupe of my Energy Siphon, and then I'm going to Purge, again for consistency. And I think I head straight into Chased. Yes, I do. And I'm hoping for early Inferno draw in particular, so that I don't have to stack up spell weakness on Chased for him to Purge. And not only do I get Inferno, I get both Infernos. That's a 400 damage draw and an 800 damage deck, which is pretty great. And Seraph dies the following turn. He gives very good patterns in that I can kill all the non-boss enemies. That's no problem. And the audio seems to have cut out here. This is, after all, backup footage. Hopefully it will come back in, but if not, it's not a huge deal, I hope. So that's Hellhorn taken care of, and coming up next is the final run, which is Umbra Remnant. And for Umbra Remnant, you reset for Void Bindings, and you take Monstrous Penumbra and avoid Seraph the Chaste. It's a fairly reset-heavy setup, but I do it last because it is so ridiculously consistent. It's kind of insane. I can even take Diligent, which would otherwise be scary in a spell-based strategy. And then I have Monstrous, and I just go. So Void Binding is so good because it's kind of a self-contained strategy with Monstrous Penumbra. It's got Damage Shield for defense, it's got Rage, and that increases Monstrous Penumbra's attack, and since Monstrous specifically has Trample, you don't even need to worry about multiple enemies on a single floor. As long as you have the raw stats, you just win, which is pretty nice. Here I don't have the raw stats because I took the Spikes trial, but that's worth it. It allows me to get upgrades I wouldn't otherwise be able to, and the Mustache Man, I don't remember what his actual name is off the top of my head, is still pretty clearly dead, courtesy of the Entombed Explosive in the back. So now I head for Merchant Upgrades always. If I had seen a Shadow Siege, I would have taken it because of Flicker's Liquor, but I didn't. That's fine. And here's Holdover, and I'm going Hallelujah, because that's the most important upgrade for this entire run, making sure your Void Bindings are always, always drawn. And you don't really need to worry about anything else once you get Holdover. You just purge the deck down to pure Void Bindings, plus in this case, because I'm playing against Diligent, I'll use some extra cards like Immortal Trade to consume out so that I don't have to consume my Void Bindings early. And those consumed targets will always be zero-cost Ember Drain cards, like that one. Perils of Production or Immortal Trade are great for it. And there's also random zero-cost stuff like Purifying Cleanse you can take if you want. Vapor Funnel, again, I'm always happy to see it, in case some weak backliners get through. And here's the quintuple dupe, and I'm really, really happy. I think this is the only time I fist pumped during the run, just because that event is so good to see. It means I no longer need to worry about Seraph the Diligent, just because I have enough Void Bindings that I don't care. I can consume out all of them and still have enough shields and rage by the time we're done to just wipe the floor with him in Relentless. That's something like a 1 in 20 shot, but I'm very glad to see it. That's the reason why I even go to Caverns at all, because it is a significant time investment to do so. But when you get this, every single fight in the game becomes almost completely trivial. And so now it's just a matter of how far or how fast I can go. And because these are all holdover Void Bindings specifically, I always know exactly where they'll be, and I can plan accordingly. Now I get Furnace Tap here. This isn't a mistake in its own right, but I do make another mistake with it later in the run. I take Capacity here, so I don't accidentally die later, basically, because Monstrous Penumbra has 6 Capacity at its 3rd stage, and although I do have Space Prisms, not being able to play in first turn would suck. Holdover doesn't go on anything, surprisingly, and I should not double stack Furnace Tap here because I need to double Emberstone it in order for it to be playable. It's a pretty big mistake, actually, to choose double stack there, and it's one that will repeatedly cost me time. It doesn't cost me much other than time, and I believe I get to play it out at least once or twice, but having it 0 cost and thus reliably playable under Ember Drain would make things even easier. There was a decent case for not having done that and kept the double stack, just because I have Flicker's Liquor, and so I can play it on any turn with a Dreg, or any turn with Perils of Production. But I just didn't really get lucky and wasn't able to play those much, if at all. 2-phase Relentless is ridiculous, though, here. And it's, I think, going to be the standard for much of the rest of the run. So I choose to take nothing there, and then grab another Furnace Tap. Again, if this were 0 cost, it would be much better. But as it is, it's still fine. And it does get some love in, I think, the final fight. I also love having Space Prism as the extra card for this run, because it's an insurance against me being an idiot and not taking capacity, as well as an insurance against Consume Seraph because they're just 0 cost, consume sort of throwaway cards that you can use instead of your Void Bindings. So I just continue to play Void Bindings out, Space Prism just to get rid of it. And you can see I can't play that Furnace Tap because of the ridiculous amount of Ember Drain. No worries there. It's perfectly fine. Still a 3-phase on Sower of Sorrows. And I'm taking Merchant of Magic, because why would I take anything else? Definitely don't remove a Void Binding there, but I get rid of the Shade Splitters because they're especially bad for this run. I go so far as to skip the Merchant of Magic, which I actually would not do in retrospect. I would look for double stack or other stuff, like consume removed Furnace Taps, or even just purging. But as it is, it's fine. Void Binding is strong enough to counteract the incant effect of the guys in front, so I don't need to worry about them at all. And this is kind of the benchmark wave, and I am able to kill it. So that basically means I'm good to go for the rest of the fight. Again, I haven't gotten a lucky Furnace Tap draw yet, but that's okay. I don't really mind having a dead draw in my deck just because I'm holding over so much juicy Void Binding. The lore for Void Binding, I believe, says that it's like an addictive practice, and it really is. It can completely trivialize a run just on its own. The Void Binding run is just ridiculously consistent. I'm clearing the Entombed Explosive. I should not have cleared a Dreg. I should have instead cleared like Shade Splitter or something. So I could get better odds of a Flicker's Liquor hitting Furnace Tap or just getting Perils of Production out. But here's a straight up Furnace Tap that I can play. And that's always a happy thing, because now I don't need to worry about the blights in this fight at all. The first Purifier is dead. And I can just do 1-1-1-1-1-1-1, or in this case 2-2-2-2-2. All the way through. Again, missed Furnace Tap. Again, don't need it. To the point that I'm ending turn just because he dies so fast. Don't need anything here, so I should have gone for the fast skip. But as it is, it's fine. Purging out Shade Splitter and then another Dreg. Not sure about the Dreg, but Shade Splitter definitely right. And then the last Entombed Explosive. And that's all. I head straight into the Diligent fight, and I don't even really worry about it. The Vengeful Shards are merely slow. They're annoying, but they're not that bad. First turn Furnace Tap again. Great. Now, most of the fight is trivial. All I need to do is get enough Void Bindings. I should have played the Space Prism first there, obviously. But even with the slow Vengeful Shard animations, it's still fine. Immortal Trade I don't really like here, so I can get rid of it for a Consume. And again, I'm always going to do that. I'm going to target the weakest card, the one that isn't a Void Binding, to consume whenever possible. And here it's just not possible, so I have to consume out of Void Binding. And I am almost done. Just a couple phases until Relentless, and a couple more slow Vengeful Shard animations. And I'm down to a couple Void Bindings, but you can see that I've scaled high enough that it really does not matter. Here's Relentless. Seraph dies in, I think, 2 phases? Maybe even just 1. So I just gathered my thoughts. I actually split early with Live Split here, so I'm trying to fix it, but I wasn't able to. But I had to retime it anyway, so I know the run is a 59-11. You can retime it yourself as well. It comes from when I click Depart in the first run to when I kill Seraph in the 5th. So, that's it for this run. Sorry about the lack of Live Split. I will hopefully fix it for next time. And yeah, 5 runs with an average of time of under 12 minutes. That's pretty nuts, and I'm really happy with it. And if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe, it helps me out a lot. And if not, please tell me what I can improve in the comments below. Have a good one, and thanks for watching.